Boys don't like girls who swear. You're really aggressive. That's not very ladylike. Why don't you smile more? Any of these sound familiar? If I could summarize all of the above into one message, it would be being a woman means being tolerable. Therefore, being angry simply won't do. But what if feeling and transmuting your feminine rage was actually the key to your untapped potential? The woman who knows no is a complete sentence. The woman who leaves when her boundaries are ignored. The woman who isn't afraid to have her passion confused for aggression. This episode is an invitation to finally embody her. Because without her fire, you're subconsciously cutting yourself off from your joy and authenticity too. Welcome to Rich in Spirit.
Paid in full.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Eimanne.
Here, we believe you don't have to choose between spiritual growth and financial success,
Ambition and alignment.
or healing and building an abundant life.
Join us each week to quantum leap with both proven, profitable systems and the spiritual insights that will light your way through life's greatest expansions.
Let's step into success that feeds your soul.
Well, we have a very fun, can you call anger fun, topic today. But before we get into it, because it's really important, I think, with these conversations that go deep and that really strike emotional chords, would you like to start us off with some grounding breaths?
Love to. Okay, so wherever you are, come into stillness. And if you're driving, please don't close your eyes. But if you're not driving, you can close your eyes and take a deep inhale into the nose. Hold at the top for a moment. And then sigh it out. Okay, two more times. So take another deep breath into your nose, holding at the top. And audibly sigh it out. You can shake out your hands if you want. Add some movement, especially for this last one. So deepest inhale of the day, holding at the top. Oh, let it all out. Shake out your shoulders. Shake your boobies if you got them.
Shake them if you got them.
Yes. Okay, we have arrived.
We have arrived, and the topic today, ladies, in parentheses, gentlemen, it's okay to be angry. How to process and channel your anger towards creativity, boundary setting, and more. Victoria, you mentioned that you've maybe been dealing with some anger. Is that something you want to share?
Yes, I would love to share about this. So, I went through a lot of anger processing last year. And if you have seen our first episode, Why is the Universe Punishing Me? Then you can probably understand why I was doing a lot of that processing last year. But I was in this mastermind for my business, and something that kept coming up with not only the head coach that was involved with the business side, but also the somatic practitioner that was part of the program, that I needed to process my anger before I could really focus on my business. It was that much of a barrier. And the problem was not the anger itself, it was that I was not addressing it and I was not feeling it. And instead, it was coming out as bitterness, passive aggression. It was coming out at the wrong people at the wrong times. And a lot of it had to do with childhood and also the general assumption that, or I guess it would be more of a societal rule, unspoken rule, that women are not supposed to, quote unquote, be angry. We're not supposed to show rage. We're not supposed to be aggressive or speak our minds. And I have been very outspoken ever since I was a child, but I have had to repress that because of all the messaging of like, guys don't like that, or friends don't like that, people don't like that, you won't be liked if you do that. So I had to really sit with that messaging and let it go and feel the pain underneath and feel the loneliness and the fear of not being loved, the fear of not being accepted. And a big way I did that was, of course, through breath work, through conscious connected breathing, and also through these sessions that were in the mastermind with a coach where he would have us connect with whatever emotion we were feeling and then have it connect back to a previous memory from childhood, whatever arose in the session, and really close our eyes and go into that emotion, into that memory. And oftentimes it would end with crying, feeling upset, because a lot of times anger is protecting a more vulnerable emotion. And yeah, it helped me so much. I know in a past episode I was talking about feeling this underlying anxiety, but like I also said that was kind of one piece of a much bigger issue that I've been experiencing my whole life with anxiety and stress, and processing that anger took a huge chunk of that away. So that was my most recent experience with it. And I guess on the other side, yes, I felt more calm. And I've also felt more, I guess, accepting and loving and connected to who I am and just less reactive overall. It's definitely helped my relationship. Yeah, it's helped every area of my life. So it's my very long
I
answer.
I want to get more into how you actually processed it because I think that's really important. But I'm wondering, do you remember a specific time when you were a child when you got angry and you were maybe reprimanded or punished for that emotion? Because we talk a lot about the societal pressures and this underlying idea that, yeah, you won't be liked if you're getting angry as a woman. But do you have a specific memory of that actually coming into play when you were a kid?
I'm trying to remember back to the sessions. I do have memories of swearing when I was younger and being told guys don't like that. Men don't like women who swear. And thinking, well, I like to swear. It's funny. It's part of my personality. And even though that's a really small example, it was part of this.
Bigger narrative. And they were telling you, you have to control yourself based on other people's opinions of you.
Yeah. Yes, in particular men. Like you have to control this quote unquote aggressive side of yourself if you want to be loved, if you want a partner, if you want to get married, etc. So that was a big one. My parents have told me about tantrums and different things I threw when I was younger, which all children do. And I know that it definitely was not this thing of feel your emotions, what's going on, let it all out. It was definitely like, stop crying, you're embarrassing me, that whole thing.
Stuff it down,
Yeah, stuff it down.
behave,
Avoid it, behave.
mind your manners.
Yep, be polite.
Your emotions aren't appropriate.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, if other memories come to me, I will share. But that was an overarching thing. And I do remember, this is vulnerable, I will share this. I would get so mad sometimes that I would self-harm. I would cut my leg, like on my thigh where no one could see it. This was probably between like age 13 and 16 because I had no outlet for the emotional pain and it was just easier to feel physical pain. It's interesting to think what that would have looked like or been like if I had a healthy outlet. And I will say that exercise and sports, thank God for them because that was my first therapy and definitely my first outlet with dealing with anger. So I'm very grateful for that. But in my experience with exercising, yes, of course, you're releasing endorphins. It's great for you, great for your mental health, but you're not really addressing specifically what's going on. So it may feel good that day or for a few days, but unless you address the root, it's going to persist. But what has your experience been with anger?
Let's see. When I think back to childhood, because before we started this episode, I was trying to remember Yeah, was there a moment when I got angry and that was not okay? Like very specifically made obvious to me that your anger is not an appropriate emotion. And the thing that came up was this time when I remember being upset and mad with my mom about something, I don't remember what, but I told her I hated her, right? I said, I hate you. And it was just, I was a child who was angry and I said something stupid, right? I shouldn't have said that, but I was just like, I hate you. I didn't mean it. And her reaction to that was to take all of my belongings and throw them in the trash and get rid of them forever.
What?
And then like send me to my room and tell me like I wasn't allowed to come out and as she like bagged up all of my belongings and like threw them away. Now, I shouldn't have said what I said, but I'm not sure her reaction was quite appropriate either. And, I'm not a mom. I don't know what moms do in this situation, but I've seen a fair bit of moms on TikTok talking about how they handle situations like that. And yes, I think there's more education and mindfulness now. We have different tools than our parents had. There are more conversations about, well, why are you feeling that? And well, it's okay to feel that way, but maybe you can't express it this way. What I'm seeing, at least on my TikTok, is parents being very mindful and considerate of their children and their feelings and operating from our own places of being regulated, right? I'm seeing parents now understand the importance of regulating themselves and not reacting themselves, because I think there's sort of two different kinds of anger. There's reactive anger, which is you're exploding and you're blowing up in the moment. And then there's clean anger, which is more of an indicator of a boundary being crossed or something that maybe is hiding a more vulnerable emotion, which is important for you to pay attention to because it's keeping you stuck, it's protecting you. And so I see people now trying to understand and get to that place of clean anger. And then you can have a more constructive conversation about around it instead of just reacting. And so I think my mom's reaction, I'm sure she was dealing with her own things, but it told me that it was not okay for me to be upset. And actually, I ended up getting to the same conclusion as you. So my anger, as I thought back and I was like, were there times in my childhood where I got angry and upset and explosive? I remember more pouting. I remember pouting a lot. Just being a kind of not depressed, but just unhappy and jaded and miserable. And I think that was just covering anger. I learned, I was taught, I was told you can't be angry. So I had this simmering anger that came through in the form of this pouty child. And probably everyone just thought I was difficult. But as I grew into a teenager, that ended up being channeled into the same place as you with self harm. And I had self harm tendencies, cutting, bulimia. When I look back, I can see that I didn't know how to process my emotions, those tendencies, because now I don't have those habits. And it's been a very, very long time since any of that. But as soon as I got out of my house and as soon as I started to learn ways to process my emotions and process my anger, breath work, yoga, for me as well, sports was really important. Running saved me so much. It allowed me to look back on those experiences where I was maybe doing those self-harm habits and realize that it was just unprocessed emotion. I just didn't have the tools to understand what I was feeling. And so I put that emotion into something physical because I could understand a physical pain more than I could understand an emotional pain. Anger needs to be moved. Looking at those experiences, anger exists in our body and exists in our minds and emotional state, and it has to be moved. And if you don't find a healthy way to move it, you end up finding unhealthy ways to move it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know a lot of women will relate to what you shared about that time you expressed anger and because it was met with such a harsh response. How old were you when that happened?
I don't remember. I think like seven, somewhere between six, seven, eight.
So very much a child.
It would have been 10 years old max, I think.
Yeah. And did you get more of the reaction that you wanted from pouting or from using other emotions?
Hmm. Possibly the reaction I got when I pouted was a little bit of attention, people
Mhm.
trying to make me happy, and I probably did want that. So the answer would be yes. But I wasn't happy.
Mhm.
People were paying attention to me and trying to make me happy, but I wasn't happy.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. I was also thinking when you were talking about your mom's reaction and about how the millennial parents, go millennials, are learning to regulate or know how to regulate before responding. I see that with a lot of my friends who are parents, and it just brings me so much joy. I hope I can do the same someday.
Same. Thank you guys. Good example. Appreciate you. Where you're like reparenting your inner child.
Yes, exactly. Yes, so true. And I was thinking about, even though I don't have a specific memory, there were a lot of instances where I was super young expressing anger and truly did not know any better. And as if I was a grown adult. They didn't mitigate, is that the right word? The approach and take into consideration this is a 6-year-old, this is a 7-year-old, this is a 3-year-old.
Right.
And that is huge. And I've been thinking about this a lot with my dogs and just forgetting that they are dogs and getting annoyed at little things they do when really they're just trying to show me love and they just want attention. And I'm like, get out of the way.
Yeah, and they're kind of acting at the level of a 3-year-old. If
Yes,
you had a 3-year-old running around, your dogs are kind of at that level of cognitive ability.
exactly. So I'm like, this is really good practice for me to have awareness and be kinder and pause and be like, this is a dog. This is not a 30-something-year-old human.
They don't know any better. Let me change my approach. Mm.
Yes, exactly.
Mm. So when you catch yourself in those moments thinking, okay, I'm getting angry at this animal for wanting my attention, how do you get yourself to that place of, okay, hang on, it's a dog. Let me change my approach. Is there something in the moment that helps you?
That's a good question. I will take some deep breaths and adjust my tone. I may say the same thing, but I'll say it in a kinder way. And if I do say it in a sharper way, I will hug them and apologize and be like, Victoria, it's not okay. But I do find in general, the more I do my self-care and my sleep and breath work, meditation, whatever, not saying I have to do a million things every day to feel normal, but when I have my time to connect with myself and regulate, like we were saying earlier, that does impact not only how I treat myself, but how I treat everyone around me for the rest of the day. And when I didn't have those tools or I didn't know those tools existed, there was zero awareness. And when I did get angry or overreact about something, of course I would feel bad, but I would immediately go into blaming. And it felt really uncomfortable to take responsibility and apologize. And I think that comes from so much anger being directed at me from when I was younger. To take responsibility and be like, this is my fault, felt in the past so overwhelming because it was going back to this old wound of like, I do everything wrong. I'm always criticized. I'm yelled at all the time. So it was like, I'm just going to blame someone, whatever. They made me angry. That's their fault. And now it's the awareness of like, no, you don't have to respond that way. You can say what you mean without saying it mean. One of my favorite sayings.
Wait, say that again. You can say it.
You can say what you mean without saying it mean.
Ooh, that's good. That brings up something you mentioned, your tone, changing your tone. And I'm sure we've all heard this before, but like 90% of communication is nonverbal. But that doesn't mean, and I think there's a big misconception about this. People think, oh, well, that means 90% of communication is body language. But no, nonverbal means things like your tone and intonation and pacing. Verbal is just the words. So when you change your tone, you 100% change the meaning and you change 90% of communication, a piece of that at least. And it's funny because a lot of relationships, this might be a common issue where one partner says, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm not saying anything mean or I'm not saying anything wrong. And then the other partner says, yeah, but your tone is really mean. Your tone is cutting. Your tone is conveying to me that you're upset.
Hmm.
And if we don't recognize that our tone and our nonverbal side of communication carries that much weight and maybe carries things like anger that we're repressing and stuffing down, then we can do a lot of damage with that without ever saying anything mean.
Right. It's so true. I know the term gaslighting is overused, but I think that it can definitely be used in this scenario because someone is picking up on the tone, like you just said, and the other person's like, no, I didn't say it that way. And the person who was being yelled at starts to think that they're crazy or they're imagining it, or am I just not getting the joke? And I see both sides of it because I've definitely been there where I'll say something sarcastic and the person gets upset and I'm like, "Well, I just said this," and they're like, "No, you didn't say it that way." But I think not to make an excuse for that because that is not okay, but the idea of taking responsibility and being like, "Oh, I hurt this person's feelings," when you haven't done any work on yourself and you don't have awareness around it, it feels so heavy and painful to look at that and be like, "Oh my God, I fucked up again. I did something wrong again. I hurt someone again." But that is all part of the growth because you are really harming your partner if you're doing that all the time and you're making them think that they're crazy or they're imagining your tone or whatever. That is going to build up some anger over time for sure.
100%. I have a client, wonderful long relationship with their partner, but one phrase, one line, partner said one thing, and just the way they said it cut through to them so deep that they've been hanging on to that one line for months now. And they're not even sure if their relationship will continue just because of this one thing that was said. And, we can look at it and be like, oh, wow, it was one line, but one line can completely break all of the years of trust that you've built with somebody. And so if we're not conscious of that, and I used to do this too. I used to be very sarcastic with partners. And I don't know if it came from that pouting teenager who needed to protect herself and couldn't express her anger in a healthy way. And I probably felt angry and resentful about certain things regarding my partners. And instead of just bringing it up in a healthy communicative container, I would let it come through in these kind of biting, sarcastic remarks that were like personal attacks. And they were really hurtful. So when we allow those things to come through and hurt people unintentionally, we don't realize how much damage it's doing.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that allowed you to take accountability for your own anger and reach that place of apologizing or reach that place of accepting responsibility?
Definitely doing this work. And also, when I had my year of celibacy, so I did a year of celibacy in 2023 going into 2024, and I really reflected during that time on how I had showed up in past relationships. And I had just gotten out of a 4.5 year relationship, and I was very angry about certain things, understandably. But the more I sat with my part in it, not only in that relationship, but in other relationships, I was like, wow, I was not very nice. Or I was, not that I wasn't nice, but I was I guess it's still not nice, but the level of the level of condescension and passive aggression, because I've never been a big yeller. I've never gotten angry with my partners in that way. And it's interesting because in my childhood, with my parents, I would be very combative, very sarcastic, very angry, just giving it right back, did not care. But with everyone else, I was really trying to keep the peace and hated conflict and didn't really have any boundaries. And so in relationships, the anger was still very much there, but it was all beneath the surface, like I was saying earlier, and coming out as the passive aggression, the condescension, the disrespect, just no respect at all. None. I know my partners felt that. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about the masculine feminine dynamic, and something that, or the number one thing that men value from their partner is respect. So if you are not trusting them, and of course it's like, well, they did this, so why would I trust them? Or they said it this way, so whatever. We can go back and forth with that all day. The chicken come before the egg, who knows? But to take radical responsibility is the first step, or one of the most important steps to showing up as a partner and healing your shit. Because no matter how much work you do on yourself when you're single, stuff is going to come up with when you're with someone. It's going to be triggered. And I thought I would do this year of celibacy and I would be perfect. And I would just go into a relationship and I've healed everything. Let's get married in 6 months, that whole thing. And then I realized there was a lot, especially around the anger. But it was interesting because my current partner wasn't really doing anything to trigger it. It was clearly just this old story and these old beliefs that were coming up. Or I shouldn't say he wasn't triggering anything, but he was doing very minor things that didn't really need to be made into a big deal, but because it was reminding me of something else. So that has been super helpful, probably not super fun for him, but it's been really helpful to see those things that I would not have seen if I was not in relationship.
So he does something that shines a mirror on your places that you thought you had healed, but are still being triggered. And then how do you deal with that once it comes up?
It depends what it is, or this severity I'm experiencing it. But I would say breath work is definitely a go-to, and I'll I'll start with breath work and then I will start hitting a pillow or screaming at the top of my lungs, stomping around, moving in ways where if someone looked in the window, they would call someone and they would put me in a straitjacket. I am just completely letting it go, going crazy. It's fun. It's exhausting, but it's fun. And there's always crying at the end.
Emotional release.
Yeah. Anger is protecting a deep pain, a deep sadness. And that is what we do to get through the anger to what is really going on, what is really causing the trigger, causing the
Yeah.
need to protect, to defend, to make that little slight comment.
Anger is a boundary emotion. And this has come up a couple times just in our conversation, but exercise helped anger. Screaming and shaking it out has helped anger. In a bad way or in an unhealthy way, like self harm, helped our anger. And obviously, that's an unhealthy way to process it. But the reason why all of these things helped the anger is because anger activates our threat detection system, right? So if we think back to an evolutionary level, anger alerted us to danger and to problems and to injustice and boundaries being crossed, maybe with other tribes, or, it alerted us to danger. It became a physical response, right? It starts in our amygdala in our brain, but it becomes a physical response in the body. Your heart rate activates, your adrenaline pumps, you are on edge. And when we're told to suppress that or told that makes you unlikable, we face an even greater reaction to it. Then we learn that that physical response, we might feel it, but we really just stuff it down. In other words, it becomes this like festering thing inside of us. But anger's not passive like that. And we turn it into these passive behaviors, these sarcastic comments, these biting remarks. And so when we turn anger, which is supposed to be active and get us out of a dangerous situation, into something that is passive, that's where it becomes destructive force in our life.
Yes.
Rather,
How do you use anger in a positive way?
mm,
Once you've processed and harnessed it, what can it then become?
on a metaphorical level, anger gets compared to fire a lot, right? And fire, unchecked, is very destructive. Fire burns everything down in its path. It destroys relationships, it destroys homes, it destroys careers, livelihood. If you leave your anger unchecked, like a fire, it can just destroy everything. However, fire is also the sustenance for life, right? I mean, from our very earliest days, fire cooked meat for us, fire provided warmth, fire becomes fuel, it powers engines, it takes us places, right? It powers rockets to the moon. People can have their own debates on that one, but it forges steel, powers rockets to somewhere. Back on track. It forges steel. Fire is a creative force as well. So the goal is not to extinguish the fire. The goal is to learn how to work with it. Same with your anger. How am I doing that in my life? I am allowing myself to be angry and not forgive my abuser yet. Because we're called to forgiveness. So many major religions and spiritual practices call us to forgiveness. And I don't think there's anything wrong with forgiveness. However, people that rush into it are maybe doing more harm than good. And there are some studies that have come out recently about forgiveness being the quickest way back into the abuse cycle.
Mm.
So I did some more research on that, and to be honest, I'm not totally convinced by these studies and the science behind it, but there is some truth. Oh, okay, so here's a funny story. I'm an ultra marathon runner. I run 100-mile races, right? They're very painful. They suck. You feel like you're dying. And at the end, you're just like, oh, thank God that's over. Like, I just suffered for 30 hours. But then a week later, you're like, wow, when's the next one? I think I'll sign up again. So our brains are very adept at forgetting pain. And that same pathway is the pathway that if you choose forgiveness too quickly, then you forget the pain and suffering that someone has caused you. And it allows you to just let go of those boundaries that maybe should have been created through anger. And it allows that pain and that suffering to happen again. So, are we called to forgiveness? Yes, but we can't skip over the important step of being angry first. We can't just stuff down being angry for the sake of forgiving someone because that just keeps that pathway open. And we haven't learned the boundary. We haven't put in place the lessons that being angry would have taught us. We haven't turned it into a creative force. And then there's also a distinction between forgiving someone in your heart and allowing them access to you again. For a lot of people, it's okay once you, I think, process through the anger and once you really understand what's going on. And don't rush that. I see so many people wanting to rush that, especially in spiritual communities where it's all supposed to be high vibe and light and love, and it just doesn't matter because we're in this human experience. But you really, yeah, you're in the human experience, and anger is a valid human emotion. So you have to feel it. And if you try to rush past that, then you're just doing the exact same thing. You're just suppressing it. They're uncomfortable with anger. Just because it's uncomfortable for people doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. So if someone's hurt you, it's okay to be angry at them. Even if that person is your parent, even if that person is your sibling, your coworker, your friend, it might take some time too. You can't rush it, but it's okay to be angry. The problem is just not expressing it because anger needs to move. Don't just let that fire burn inside you unchecked. You have to let that move. And good ways to let it move is, yes, breath work, sports. And you talked about sports not being specific enough. So I think a way to get it specific is to first name what you're feeling, right? Recognize that you're angry. I feel angry. And if you know why, great. I feel angry because of this. Maybe start with a little bit of journaling, but even if it's just mentally recognizing the feeling and then moving that energy, maybe a boxing class. I used to box in LA, like boxing classes, and that was wonderful for moving anger. But maybe it is just screaming and shaking it out in your room. And I've done that before too. And then afterwards, that's where you can process and that's where you can write. I think is the best way is writing, but there's a lot of other ways to do that. And if you're writing, you can really translate that feeling into clarity. There's some questions you could ask yourself, like, what boundary needs to be set? What boundary is my anger calling me to set? Or what decision has to be made here? What decision is my anger pointing me towards? After you've processed, right? This can't happen before the actual physical processing because if you do it before moving the anger out of your body, then you're going to be trying to answer these questions from the place of being angry and hurt. But if you do it after, then you've released that. You've moved through it. Maybe you cried. Maybe you got through the crying physical release. And then you're in a different state of being and you can have clarity from a healthier emotional state to these questions. Another one, what truth have I been avoiding?
Mhm.
And if you can answer those questions and do a little bit of journaling, that's when your anger becomes constructive. And that's when it turns into aligned action instead of just something that's festering inside of you or controlling your life from the back seat.
Very true. I love that. For I have thoughts on the forgiveness and thoughts on the boxing because I have some stats here about boxing and how helpful it is for anger. So I'm gonna read a little bit in a second. But before that, I totally agree about the forgiveness piece. I do think that forgiveness in your heart is a necessary step in order to fully move on from a situation. But if you try to do that when you're not ready, then it's just not happening. You're not actually going to be able to forgive the person until you can feel that forgiveness. And yeah, I don't think anyone should ever have to reconnect or start communicating again with someone if they don't want to as part of the forgiveness process. Forgiving is for you. Forgiving is so you can let go, move forward, move on with your life without holding on to the stagnant energy. But depending on what this person did to you, it can absolutely take time. It's a very important step, but it's not something you can fake or something that you can quickly dust under the rug or whatever the saying is.
Sweep under the rug.
Sweep under the rug. Oh my God. Speaking of thinking you're a forgiving person when you actually haven't forgiven people, I am still in the process of doing my 12 steps for Al-Anon. I'm in Al-Anon. I think I've been on step 6 for 4 years because I did step 4, which is writing down every person you have a resentment toward. And up until that point, this was a few years ago, 2022, I think. I thought that I was this forgiving person and I was chill and I let things go. I had over 100 people on my list.
Oh my God. Resentments against over 100 people?
Like I'm talking about a gym teacher from like kindergarten or something. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I was just being completely honest and
Yeah.
thinking back and writing any person that if they came to my mind, I still felt full charge.
Well, and they came to your mind because we remember the most emotional moments, right? We don't remember bland, whatever conversations. So those things did trigger you.
Yep. That was around the time I really started getting into somatic work. I had been doing breath work for a few years, but I don't think I fully understood it until around that time and really started to dial in on the resentments and the anger that had kind of just become normalized because so many women are so angry and so bitter and resentful and just passive aggressive. Like it's kind of a normal female, I don't want to say normal, but a common female trope is the wife that's nagging.
Yeah.
And that's all anger. that person is so angry. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but it's not, it shouldn't be this thing that is normalized where
Yeah.
someone is just actually fucking miserable
Hmm.
and it's being written off and not taken seriously.
Just like a joke.
Yes, because they don't have the tools to work through it and to heal themselves and end up living a happier life.
Yeah.
So, part of the step is reading that list to your sponsor, going through why you're resentful and truly forgiving those people. And that was a life-changing moment in my anger processing journey for sure.
So step 6, where you're at right now, that's reading the list and going through and forgiving it. And so you're still just working through the
Well,
list,
that
or
was step
what is the
5, and then I don't remember what step 6 is. I still talk to my sponsor all the time, but I have not been good about going to meetings or doing the step
okay.
work. So,
You're just in a different season right now. You're in a different
yes,
cycle.
it pops into my head at least once a week. I'm doing too many other self-help things, but Al-Anon's amazing if anyone's interested. We'll include a link to the website in the show notes.
Yes.
So I was doing some research on the benefits of boxing for releasing anger, for overall mental health, because I also used to do kickboxing all the time. And it really helped me. And I remember my teacher used to be like, "Who made you so angry?"
Do you have the time? Because I have a list of over 100 people I can answer that question with.
Exactly. I can read this to you too. We can include this article below. It's a PubMed article. God bless you if you write these types of articles because it is painstaking, but I hope whoever's doing it is just nerding out and loving it.
There's people that are just so research oriented.
Yes, I love that for them, but I was reading it like not me. I am not there. But okay, so according to this study, I have all the information in the show notes. Boxing reduced stress and improved mood, self-esteem, and quality of life for 94% participants. Improvement in overall mood, reduced substance use, increased self-esteem and confidence, perceived physical ability. I guess they felt more confident in their physical ability from boxing. Their school performance improved for the people who were in school. And these people who were in this study had symptoms of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, some of them, PTSD. Yeah, significant decrease in mental health stress. So let's get into the anger part. Many studies have shown that boxing serves an outlet for expressing anger in a healthy way and for controlling overall anger or aggression. One participant with a trauma history described, while anger can fuel a training session, it quickly dissipates and the interplay between the physical and intellectual begins. In another study, they commented that boxing is a way to get anger out. I'm angry, but instead of me hurting myself, which I usually do, I'm learning to channel that outward, like hitting the bags. Every time I come here, it's always better. Reduce aggression in youth, which turned into school productivity, like I was saying earlier. Yeah, this is more of the same thing. They're so exhausted by the end that the sadness, the trauma feels far further away than it did. And the mindfulness, the deep breathing with the boxing, that all helps. Okay, this is the part I was looking for. This is for marginalized, self-identified women who had experienced violence and trauma. Participants felt included in a historically masculine dominated sport and empowered in having a safe, healthy emotional outlet to release their energy and anger, with discussions around anger being an appropriate response to trauma. So these women were shown that it's okay for them to be angry. They finally were able to acknowledge that. And the use of movement-based program, which deploys the fists as weapons and the body as a source of strength and power, was very empowering for them compared to traditional talk therapy.
So, yeah, if you feel stuck with your anger, 100%, we recommend, or I recommend, boxing or kickboxing. Like, it's okay to be angry. And honestly, I remember just feeling so good after those workout classes. And they have them online too. You know, if there's not a gym near you, like they have kickboxing and boxing workouts online that you can do for free. But oh my God, it's a great way to release that stuff.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's a good place to start.
Yes. And I loved what you were saying about journaling after doing something like this, because that's the way to connect the physical with addressing the root. issue.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
can do both.
You can connect those dots and bring them together. Just a funny side note, they mentioned a couple times feeling tired afterwards, right? You start out angry and you've got all this pumping energy, and that's the physical response in your body, but then they're just tired and you're like, whew, man, I guess I feel good. I don't have the energy to be angry anymore. I saw this great video of these parents were like, okay, we have a bedtime set for our child, and it was a little boy. And it used to be a big battle to get him into bed at the bedtime. And he was like, I have all this energy still. And he would get angry and he would be upset. So, what they implemented was when bedtime comes around, if he doesn't want to go to bed, he can stay up. That's fine, as long as he's running. So, he can stay up as long as he wants past his bedtime, but he has to be running around. So the video is him running through the house back and forth, running, 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 running. And they're like, it usually lasts like tops 5 minutes. And then he's just exhausted and he's like, okay, I'm ready for bed.
Oh my
So
God, that's
then, yeah,
amazing. That is so smart. They are like doggies.
but you just channel that, right? Channel into something constructive. Okay, you've got energy, you've got anger. There's no problem with your anger. There's no problem staying up late. Just, put it to good use. Go ahead, run around a little bit, and then
Yes.
you're happy to go to bed. You're happy to relax.
Yeah. It's so true. And like you were saying earlier, this is probably not the same case with the child, but as adults, the anger is causing this activated adrenaline response. So the boxing is negating that because it makes you tired and then you're calm and you can come into your body out of your head, out of all these thoughts of like, I can't believe he did this. Why did that happen? And then you're just in your body and you're able to process it. And like you were saying earlier about setting boundaries and creativity, I want to touch on that a little bit more. When we are in this activated state or we don't feel safe expressing, we're in like a fight response, you can take a break, process, and then come back with a clear mind. And then you can actually set a boundary and speak your truth and set the tone for the conversation and be taken seriously, hopefully, depending on who you're talking to,
No, yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
coming because you're coming from this regulated, calm place, but you used that anger, you acknowledged that anger. There was a part of you that was not okay with what was going on, was not okay with what was being said. And so you're taking that, you're transmuting it, and then you're able to set this boundary instead of pushing it down or screaming, which doesn't get anyone anywhere.
Yeah.
And as far as the creativity for acting, before I do an audition, and if I have a really emotional scene, especially one that requires some anger or aggression or even being upset, because that can all be anger in some way, shape, or form, or it can go that way. I will do breath work so that I'm out of my head and I'm in touch with my body and I can channel that anger instead of going into it frustrated and flustered from something that happened earlier in the day that's unrelated to the audition. Sometimes you can just use it and go with it and see what comes up, but other times it does need to be harnessed and channeled through regulation. It can be channeled into any art, into writing, into painting, into speaking your truth online, whatever your outlet is. You can regulate and come from this more empowered place and really use that anger to express yourself, to connect with other people.
I totally agree with you about that. Like using the anger, then getting to a regulated place and expressing yourself creatively. Do you think it's possible or constructive to just go straight from the anger to the creation process? And does that help you process and regulate the anger in and of itself? Because you mentioned sometimes you can do that in an audition. What are the pros and cons to just go straight from the anger to the creative process versus processing the anger through movement, through journaling, through something else, getting to a regulated state, and then channeling it into your creativity? Is there a distinction there? And is one better than the other, or what do you get out of them?
That's a great question because I was thinking about that. And I think you can go right into the art with your anger. I think that's very important. It can be very cathartic. But I guess for me, I'm thinking from the point of an audition and memorizing lines and needing to come across a certain way, where if I was doing something that was more improv, or if I was just doing something that was more for me, then I would absolutely just go right from the anger into the art. But that's a personal preference. Maybe I'm being too controlling.
No, I mean, it seems like the answer is it really just depends on the person and on the process, right? I mean, I was
Yes.
thinking about it for me. I can't imagine wanting to paint or draw, which is something that I enjoy doing creatively, or even make videos. Well, okay, the videos where I'm talking about things like narcissism and abuse, sometimes I can go into that a little angry because emotion really gets the message across. But if I'm doing something more creative, like painting or drawing, I can't imagine wanting to do that when I'm angry. And it's probably just different for other people. Maybe there's people that when they feel angry, that is the way they process it. But for me, I have to process it physically first. And then I can get to a calmer place that allows me to sit and be still and dive back into my creative habits and joys and passions. But I can't get to those places when I'm angry. I feel blocked.
Yeah, I agree. And to be honest, the times where I have just gone from feeling angry to sharing something on social media or writing something publicly, I usually regret it or have to, or I might delete it or I have to go back and edit it. Or I try to not delete things because I'm like, this came to me for a reason and maybe if someone relates to it. But I'm definitely more in my head after I just go right into posting from feeling angry because I'm like, did I offend someone? Because yeah, we don't want to care what anyone thinks, but at the end of the day, we also don't, or I don't want to be rude or mean or whatever.
You don't want to hurt people
Exactly.
unintentionally.
Exactly. So I do get in my head of, should I have said it that way? Was that too harsh? Because like I said earlier, you can say what you mean without saying it mean.
Mm,
So I do think the regulation piece is important for most outlets.
yeah.
Cool.
I'm curious what our listeners think. Do they go to creative processes straight from angry feelings? Does that feel beneficial? Is it helpful? Does it help them process the anger? Or do you need a step in between before you can get to creative work? It seems like it's different for everybody, so I'm curious what our listeners have to say about that. So if you have an opinion on this or practice that works for you, please drop it in a DM to us on social media and a comment on this podcast. Reach out to us, let us know.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll include the resources in the show notes, and I look forward to your responses.
Yes, Kat has come to say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you. We'll be back next week. Keep processing that anger.
In today's episode, Eimanne and I challenged the angry, bitter woman trope and unveiled the power in feminine rage. We also gave you ways to move your anger so you never have to bear the consequences of when this intense emotion remains stagnant. If you try out any of the tools we shared for processing and transmuting anger, we'd love to hear about your experience, so please leave a comment below. And if you'd like deeper support moving through anger or getting unstuck, we're both taking one-on-one clients. You can sign up for a free clarity call with either of us. Links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.